Hi everyone, and welcome to this tutorial on sculpting the male head. I get a lot of requests for this, so I figured I might as well do a tutorial on sculpting male anatomy, and we're going to start by sculpting the head first, and then we'll work on the body in a different tutorial. That way we can break it up a little bit. So we're going to start from a sphere. And let's just go ahead and grab a sphere, and we'll just set up Dynamesh from the start. So I just went over here, clicked on my menu, clicked on my sphere, just going to drag it in. And at this point, I'm going to hit T to go into edit mode, but it's not a sculptable mesh at the moment. And if I try to sculpt on it, you're going to see it's going to give me an error actually. So to enable sculpting, please convert this to a 3D primitive by pressing Polymesh 3D. So I basically go over here and press Make Polymesh 3D. And now it's actually a sculptable mesh. And if I actually go on it, you can see that I can start sculpting. So let's just undo that. Okay. The other thing we want to make sure is that we're in symmetry, and we're going to press X and to go into symmetry mode. And I'm also going to want to change my matte cap material. I'm just going to go to basic material. You can pick whatever you want. I like this one. Another good one is matte cap gray. But for now, I'm going to stick to basic material, and most likely it's going to change as I do this. The other thing I want to do is I want to go into my light box, and I want to go into my grids. And you'll notice here there's a couple of grids that come with ZBrush, and one of them is a skull, and one of them is a male head. So let's just click on that. And now, by double clicking on it, you can see that ZBrush has opened up the Z grid, and basically it's going to give us the right proportions for our head to kind of go with. Okay, so one of the things we want to do is we can try scaling this up to better match our grid, or we can even try going over here and hitting in our deformation. So I was in geometry, tool, deformation, and unify. And if I hit unify, usually what unify does is if, let me show you here. Let me just scale it down. So if we have a sphere that's very small in a scene, okay, and you can tell by the size of our grid, if you press unify, it's going to enlarge that object to best fit the scene. So it didn't do anything because it was already at the right size, the most ideal size to work in ZBrush, but it's still not big enough for us. So what we're going to do is actually hit E, and again we're in symmetry mode, and E is the shortcut for the scale key, and we're just going to use this transpose line and just going to drag it up and drag it up to about there. I think that looks pretty good, and maybe we'll actually just move this a little bit towards the center of this other grid. Okay, so we have, let's hit Q to go into draw mode, or you can just hit draw up there. So now you can see that we have our sphere positioned fairly well relative to our grid. Okay, so now we can actually start figuring out how to sculpt on this. So one of my favorite tools to use for sculpting is the clay buildup, and the shortcut for that is hitting B and then C to isolate all the tools that start with the letter C, and then B again. Okay, and so it's BCB, and you can see I have the clay buildup over here. There is one more setting that I usually like to turn on right away, and that's in my brush, auto masking, and back face mask. And what this does is it'll prevent your mesh from collapsing itself when you're in thin areas of the sculpt. Now in this case, probably not going to have a lot of thin areas that would collapse on themselves. But the only part maybe is when we get to the ears, the thin areas of the ears could collapse on themselves. So just switching that on, again, brush, auto masking, backface mask, it's going to prevent itself from doing that, from squishing upon itself. Now, when we get to a point where there's thinner areas, maybe I can show that to you. But for now, I just like to turn that on automatically, because when I forget, it becomes a big mess. Okay, so another tool I really like to use is the Move tool, and it's just the standard Move tool, and I hit B, M to isolate all the tools with the that start with the letter M, and then V for Move, and you can see it's up there. And to get the basic shape, I'm just going to use the Move tool right now. With the large draw size, I'm actually going to back away from this, and I'm just using my my tablet here to make the draw size larger, or you can hit S, or you could go all the way up to here on the top menu over here, or you can try to use the bracket keys. That works too. But if you don't see me using the S key, that's just because I'm using my my tablet. Okay, so this is a fairly large object in the scene, and we can tell by the grid. Okay, so my cursor is only going to be this big right now. So you can either make the object smaller, make your grid smaller. I don't want to do all that, so I'm just going to kind of back away from it. And I have symmetry mode on, and I'm just going to make some adjustments. It's just some general adjustments. Now, another thing I want to do here is I want to go in my draw palette, and I want to go into fill mode. Make sure I'm in fill mode 3. Okay, and that just you can check what the other fill modes look like by going in your fill mode. There's basically three fill modes. I find that fill mode 3 is the best. You know, you can also adjust. Let's go a little bit closer. You can also adjust fill mode 3 by playing around with these sliders, and they kind of adjust how you see the object. Okay, so whether it's less opaque, more of a line. I usually leave it at default, but just leave it there for now. So you can play around with those settings depending on what works best for you. I think this works okay for us. So now we're just going to continue adjusting the shape of this, and we're going to look in the front view first. And then we're going to go to the side view and do the exact same thing. And this just helps us. Let's make a smaller draw size here. This just helps us, you know, getting the basic proportions out there right off the bat. Now, I'm not quite sure if this is the hairline, but up here it looks like it's the hair, so I'm just going to go maybe up to here. I'm going to take my mask, I'm going to hit Control and go into my mask menu and grab the mask lasso. I'm going to lasso the bottom part over here of the neck. Okay, so let me just show you that. Okay, that's what I did. And I'm going to hit Shift P again just to get back into that. Control, tap on the canvas, and I'm going to hit W. That just makes my enables my transpose move line. I'm going to go into the white circle over here, and I'm just going to drag that out. Okay, just to make a neck. And then Control drag on empty part of the canvas. And hit Q, go back into draw mode, and let's continue with the Move tool. Okay, so one thing I'm going to do is going to hit Shift F just to show you the polyframe, Shift P just to get out of the grid mode here. And you're going to see that there's a lot of stretching over here, okay, because we're actually not in Dynamesh mode. So what I want to do is actually enable Dynamesh mode right away. So let's go into Geometry, Dynamesh, and let's take off Project and make sure the blur is down to 0 because I don't want to blur anything. Now, our scene is pretty big. Our object in the scene is quite large, and Dynamesh is very dependent upon the size of the object in the scene. So I'm pretty sure that the default resolution of 128 is probably going to be enough. It might even be too much. So what we can do is actually go here, click, and let's just type in 64, which is about half that, right? So let's hit Dynamesh and see what it gives us. Okay, so it gives us 63,000 points. And if we look at our mesh, it's been updated, and it seems like it's a pretty decent density. It might be actually a little bit too dense for our purposes at the moment. So when we're working with ZBrush, we actually want to work from lower resolution to higher resolution as needed. Okay, so at this stage, we're really just working on the very, very basic outright shapes. Basically, it's what we call the primary forms. So at this stage, we don't want to go too deep in resolution. So what I'm going to actually do is just go to Control Z, just to get back to where we were. And let's make this a little bit lower. So let's go 32. Okay. Again, make sure the blur is set at 0. And let's hit Dynamesh. And now we have a mesh that's 15,000 some odd polygons. And that's perfect. That's actually quite good for our purposes. Okay, let's hit Shift F just to get out of polyframe mode. And now we can make larger movements because the resolution is, I guess you can say lighter, is not as dense. So it allows us to make larger movements a lot more easily. If we were to have a really dense mesh, it would be more difficult to make these larger movements. Okay, so that's just something to keep in mind. That's why we work lower resolution and then increase the resolution when we need more details. So right now, if you can look, you can see our mesh, it's really not detailed at all. Okay, so I just want to control drag to update Dynamesh because it is something you have to activate, and the way you activate it is just control drag on an empty part of the canvas. Okay, now if I control drag again, because I haven't actually made any modifications to the mesh, Dynamesh won't reactivate. So if I go with the clay buildup and start making some changes, you can see that it reactivates. Okay, so that's something to keep in mind as well. Dynamesh does not activate when you don't make any changes on the mesh. Alrighty, so let's go hit Shift P, bring back our grid, or you can press the floor button over here. Let's go and hit Shift F or the polyframe button on the side to get back our mesh without the polyframe. So let's start sculpting. I'm here with clay buildup brush, and what I want to do now actually is go and click on my, hit Control, click on the mask menu, and whoops, hit mask pen, and I want to draw a mask in this area where the ear is. Okay, you can see it kind of over here. I'm going to hit Control, tap on the empty part of the canvas to basically invert my mask, and I hit W to draw out a transposed line, and I'm going to use the white circle here, holding down Shift, and I just want to bring out this volume to create kind of this ear shape. Okay, Control, and Control drag again to activate Dynamesh and retopologize that area. Now another thing you'll notice is that we're not in perspective mode, and the reason is we need to use this. If we're going to use the grid, it's better to use it in orthographic, although if you do hit P to go into perspective mode, when you have, let's see here, let's go to maybe left, right. You can see that we have this P line, project edit line. If we have that activated, you'll notice that, whoops, where's it going? It projects where your cursor is onto the reference grid. Okay, I don't find that particularly useful, so I just use that. I just usually turn it off. And once I have my basic shapes, let's go back into orthographic. Once I have my basic shapes, I usually kind of just turn off the grid anyway. So let's actually just indicate by holding down Alt and making some divots here where the eyes would be. Oops. And let's maybe kind of draw in just some nose, the mouth. Let's go and hit B, D, S to get the Damien standard brush. And let's make some cuts and draw some lines just to kind of see where everything is. Let's maybe draw the hairline as well, and now we can go to Shift to the side and maybe draw some lines that indicate certain areas that we are interested in, some markers. Now you're noticing maybe that it doesn't match up exactly. So that's kind of difficult to make the grid line up exactly. You can kind of fiddle with it if you want. I usually just go by eye at a certain point. Once I have the major forms indicated, yeah, I just kind of go by eye at that point. And you can see here we kind of have the proportions fairly well down, but at this point I just want to start sketching. Okay, so let's go B, C, B, or find the clay buildup by hitting B, C, and should be over here. There it is, clay buildup. I already have it selected. So what we're going to do is, the reason I like this brush is because it's very kind of sketchy, and you can really get some nice forms with it, but I don't have to switch between brushes with this brush if I want to take away or add. So by default you add with this brush, but if I hit Alt, I can actually dig and take away material, so to speak. Okay, so as you can see, because we're such low resolution, this process becomes quite quick in being able to add and subtract. Okay, if we were at a denser resolution, let's actually just do that. Maybe crank this up, redynamesh, and you're going to see it's going to actually add quite a bit. Okay, so we're actually at 2 million. Okay, so now if I try to sculpt, it becomes a little bit quite slow. Okay, but we're not adding as much material, and we're definitely, if we go into the move tool, let's go back out, it becomes very difficult to make major changes. Let's just undo that, and we're back at 32. Okay, so that's kind of why we want to keep the resolution quite low in the beginning, as low as we can, right? As long as we can see what we're doing, that's the main thing. If we find that we're not under the details just not there, we can crank it up a little bit at a time. Not too much. A little goes a long way. So that's what we want to do. So let's just go into clay buildup, and we got our symmetry on, and we're just going to start sculpting the major forms. I'm going to kind of flatten this out a little bit. It's not quite in the area I want it. So now I'm going to create a hole. Okay, this is going to represent the cavity where my eyeballs are going to be. And I'm going to start developing the brow a little bit here. And actually another way I like to sculpt human head is to actually fill these areas in and almost create the eyelids as though the eyes were closed. I've been using this technique lately, and I actually like it quite a bit. I then eventually hollow them out again, but it just saves me the time of having to add a subtool with the sphere in there and all that at this stage, because early on you're going to make a lot of changes, so I feel it's almost better to just make it as though, you know, the person has their eyes closed, and just create kind of this ball shape with the lid. Okay, so we can start to develop the neck muscles here, and of course I'm not doing this just by eye. I'm actually, you know, I'm going to be using photo reference or some kind of reference to help me with this, because you know the human head is quite complex, so just to do this by memory would be very difficult, and it's always good to use reference. I'm just trying to sculpt using the direction of the muscles, and just laying down forms, taking away forms where there's too much material. It looks like the resolution is a little too low for me, so I'm just going to go ahead and maybe go up. Let's go to 64. Okay, let's control drag, redynamesh. You're going to see it's updated and the resolution is a little bit denser, so we're going to get a little bit more detail so we can see better what we're doing. I would say at this stage we're probably closer to secondary forms. Yeah, kind of like primary, secondary forms. We're kind of in the in-between stage at the moment. So let's just create nasal cavities over here. And just develop the idea of the eyes a little bit more. I want to create the barrel of the mouth. And I want to build this up just a little bit under here because you don't want too much of a curve. So just build that up, and you want to make sure it's three-dimensional. Just like that. Build up the brow. I want to create some kind of a jawline. Not too heavy right now. If you've noticed, I'm going all around my sculpture at this point. Not staying on one point, on one spot too long. I'm also trying to use a brush size that's as large as possible. You always want to use the largest brush size you can for what you're doing. If you're using a brush size that's too small, it just doesn't really work very well, and you'll get a lumpy sculpture. So just kind of trying to place marks on every part of my sculpture at this point, so I've touched everywhere, just like I would in real life. You know, when you're working with real life sculpture, you always want to go around the whole thing once, make sure you've touched everything, and kind of develop it as you go that way, right? Kind of develop every area to the same level, and then move to the next stage. So if I'm at the primary form stage, I want to make sure that I've worked the primary forms throughout the whole sculpture, you know, not just focused on one area. And then once I've done that, and I find that I can't do any more, I move on to the secondary forms and then the tertiary forms, which are the details. But only until I've resolved the surface of the whole sculpture at each level do I move on to the next one. Okay, and this is because if I were to just maybe pick a spot here and develop this all the way to detail, and then I look back and my proportions are all off, I'm going to have to make changes to that area I spent so much time on, and it just won't look right. Inevitably, when you're doing something like this, you're going to find that you develop one area, and you know, maybe you walk away for a bit and you look at another area and you go, oh man, you know, that doesn't look right, so you have to fix that. And then when you fix one area, you got to fix the other area. So it's constant. You're constantly tweaking and fixing and just going around the whole thing until finally you get to somewhere where you find it looks all right. So you never just want to stick to one point on the sculpture and just keep on developing that. You want to develop the whole sculpture as a whole. Okay, so for instance, I haven't touched these ears yet, so I'm going to do that right now. And you'll find that you'll probably try to develop the areas you like the least, kind of keep them for last. That's kind of probably the tendency, or at least that's for me, maybe. So you want to kind of catch yourself and make sure that you know you're not missing out areas. Just try to develop everything at once. You know, we all have our favorite things to work on, and you know, there's always going to be areas that you don't like as much, but your sculpture will really suffer if you don't work on everything as a whole. Okay, so I'm going to just go and switch to the Move tool, BMV, and just make some adjustments on these ears. Try to make them look a little bit better. Maybe I'll adjust the skull shape a little bit. Kind of looks a little Frankenstein-y, a little bit flat up here. Probably a bit too high res for these kind of movements, but it's all right. I don't use the Move tool too much, because I find that it tends to distort things a bit, so I prefer just kind of going in there with the sculpting tools and displacing the material using that method. Another brush I like to use is the trim dynamic, and that's accessed by hitting B, T, D. And what I like about this is that it's great for taking down forms and actually really creating planes that you can work from. So for instance, I can really define the planes of the face using this tool, like the cheeks over here, this plane over here, plane of the mouth, over here the nose, even the eyes. And you start to really break down the shapes into very basic forms. It's almost like it's the equivalent would be to kind of use a loop tool with a hard edge and shave off material if you were doing this with traditional clay. But you can see right away how it's breaking down the planes of the face into its very basic forms, and you're getting rid of that lumpiness that sometimes happens, especially with the move tool. Whoops. Just make sure you actually touch your model. And don't forget the back. These neck muscles over here. Just refine the shape a bit. Let's make some more adjustments with the move. Get rid of RGB. On the side view over here. And usually you want the eye to kind of comes down at an angle over here towards the corner of the mouth. So let's go ahead and hit BDS to get Damien Standard Brush. And let's just draw the line of the mouth. Okay, so starting to look okay. Maybe let's define this nose a little bit better. Obviously that has to come out. Nasal labial folds over here. Now I'm just indicating these rather harshly, but they'll be toned down. I usually like to draw a lot of the time on my sculpture. Just try to figure out exactly where things are. I also like to usually put this kind of little divot at the corner of the mouth. And at this stage, I want to look at the bottom view. Okay, and actually we can hit perspective. Let's hit P. And let's go into our draw. Make sure it's not too high. You can even go down maybe 25. Bring down our perspective a bit so it looks a little bit more natural. Not too distorted. What I like to do is use the move tool and just make sure that this is the proper shape. If you look at yourself in the mirror and you look at this angle, you'll notice that there's this kind of barrel shape. It's not flat like this, right? You want to make sure it goes down, and that way the corner of the mouth actually links with where the eye is. Now my nose is way too far in, so I just want to bring that out a bit. And maybe I'll bring my chin back. Depends what I want to do with this character, how I want him to look. If I want to make him a bit more heroic, probably bring his chin out a bit. And at this stage, I'm not trying to make him look like anything. I mean, I do have an idea in mind, but it's more about just getting the basic forms right now. So he kind of looks like pretty ugly at the moment, but it's just the nature of what happens when you're sculpting. So just looking around, I'm always looking around. Maybe make some adjustments to the eyes in the position as well. So you want to make sure that these are a bit lower. And again, you can look at yourself in the mirror or find pictures with these kind of angles, but I find that this is one of the best ways to really judge the hierarchy of the planes. So maybe the nose got a little bit too distorted. Maybe I want to give him maybe a bit more prominent brow. And you can use photo reference if you want to have a particular character that you want to kind of emulate. I'm not really looking at anybody in particular, although I'm using anatomy reference. like an actual physical anatomy model that I have. But I might just go with this and see, you know, maybe the actual digital clay will kind of speak to me, and maybe I'll create a character just based on that. But if I get stuck, I can always go back to looking at photos of people and kind of copying from there, or taking insight, I should say. Okay, let's go ahead, control drag. Just give it a quick save just in case. And just looking around, obviously this forehead needs to be adjusted. Okay, good. So you can already see that we are getting some basic shapes happening here, and we're kind of getting a sense of, well, we're getting a sense at least that this is a male, first of all, a male character. I've already accidentally made some interesting I guess character traits, so maybe let's see how this goes and where it'll take us from here. So we'll just continue on and using our very basic brushes and continue on sculpting.